representatives. Representing the entire state of North Dakota, his goal is to make sure North Dakota's voice is heard in Washington. He serves on the House Committee on the Judiciary, the Committee on Oversight and Reform, and the Senate Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. In November of this year, Kelly was reelected by the people of North Dakota to represent them for a second term. It's my pleasure to turn you over now to Congressman Kelly Armstrong. Congressman, I think you're still muted. We can't hear you.
Are we there?
There you go. There you go.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to join you guys for the 57th Annual Joint North Dakota Water Convention. First ever virtual. I think one thing about COVID, for all of the terrible things that have happened, one of the good things is that it happened now. We can do this. I think there's a whole lot of people probably on this call. I know in my office that have become technology experts, whether by force or by aptitude. So thanks for having me. In North Dakota, we know all too well the importance of water to our livelihoods. It's essential to have a sufficient and reliable supply of water that serves a variety of purposes, including domestic and municipal consumption, agriculture applications, and recreational use. We know that North Dakotans are the best managers of these water resources. The federal government obviously has a role to play in water policy, but that role should be as a supportive and cooperative partner. Because at the end of the day, local officials and water operators know what is best for their communities. I've worked with the Trump administration, Senators Hoeven and Kramer, and local leaders across the state to advocate for local control. A great example of this commitment was the title transfer for the Oaks test area from federal control to the Dickey-Sargent Irrigation District. While the district has used this area for decades, they were unable to make needed modifications due to an overbearing federal approval process. With the transfer to local control, the site can now be fully utilized to the benefit of the local users and Southeast North Dakota. Another hurdle to sound water policy has been federal overregulation. The coronavirus pandemic and subsequent regulatory rollbacks across all parts of government has demonstrated that many of the regulations in place are not necessary. Federal regulation regarding water and infrastructure development that delay projects, interfere with agriculture, and slow flood mitigation efforts, and reduce overall access to water supply need to be scrutinized and, in my opinion, often repealed. With this Congress coming to a close, I'm hopeful that one of the final bills we sign into law will be the Water Resources Development Act. This bill, which authorizes various studies and projects for navigation, flood control, and water supply, plays a large part in addressing our infrastructure needs. While I disagree with some of the policies in the recent House-passed version of the legislation, North Dakota will see some benefits, including the authorization of the Souris River Basin Flood Risk Management Project, the reauthorization of Section 594 program, which assists communities across North Dakota in designing and constructing water-related infrastructure, and the deauthorization of inactive construction authorities, making way for other priority projects. North Dakota-specific deactivations include the repeal of the Missouri River Task Force and the Rush River and Lower Rush River Clearing and Snagging Project. As we prepare for the next Congress, we can expect to consider a large infrastructure package, hopefully next year. While a large focus of this package is likely to be needed in transit projects like roads and bridges, it's essential that we continue to support our water infrastructure that improves the quality of life in North Dakota. And also, I think it's important to recognize with these infrastructure projects that we have to make sure and keep unrealistic environmental regulations out of the language text, because that tends to be what has been happening out here over the last couple of years. So we'll continue that fight, making sure we understand that our communities, our farmers, our landowners are the absolute best stewards of the land. And it's just thanks for having me today, guys. And I appreciate everything you do for North Dakota. And I hope you have a great virtual conference.
Thank you, Congressman. Are you willing to take a question or two? Or are you?
No, absolutely.
Well, thanks. I would open the floor to anyone who's got a question, or if you've. I'll check my chats here to see if anybody has sent one. We're probably still waking people up, but thank you for your enthusiasm.
Hey, I'm 2 hours ahead of Mary, so.
Okay, so that's a good lead in. Can I start? Maybe I shouldn't. Is that
I'm not
okay?
passing a federal bill on mountain time.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, so this one I've talked about. You know, eventually we're going to have to treat drinking water for talking about federal overreach. You know, we live and die by EPA, and we're going to have to treat for drugs in the water like antibiotics. I know you and I share generations of mental health and passion there. And there's still, FDA is still telling pharmacists and hospitals they can flush opioids down the toilet. EPA says you shouldn't be doing that. It's still on the list. I need you. I'll talk to your staff, or we can talk later, but that's really silly, Kelly.
Mary, actually, we have a pretty decent avenue to deal with that. This is going to seem weird in a water conference, but I am the co-chair of the Freshman Bipartisan Working Group on Addiction. And so we touch all things relating to this, such as pill buybacks and those types of things. We're actually working on a DEA issue right now for medical-based treatment. And the reason I bring that up, more importantly, isn't because of that, but I have a very good working relationship with a congressman named David Trone, who has, obviously, when you have the other party in the White House and dealing with those issues, we'll have a way to get in there and talk to some of these regulatory agencies, because obviously that is easier to solve if we don't have to pass a bill through both chambers of Congress. And when you're dealing with alphabet soup agencies, there's an ability to get them to change their regs, particularly if it doesn't need a congressional approval. So reach out to us, get us that stuff, because David Trone and I talk two or three times every couple of weeks, and we'll see if we can get something done on it.
Well, I've taken up the chain as far as I can, and with FDA, and I can't get the right people to call me back, so we'll talk.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works, isn't it?
Yes.
Mary and Congressman, is the issue that the opioids don't break down in the environment, and so they'll be essentially stay with the water? Is that the potential concern?
It's what we're all learning about the water cycle. You know, everybody amazes me. To me, it's basic information. It's, antibiotics from feed. It's just surface water. It's a big deal. Eventually, we're going to have to treat for that stuff. And plastics in the water.
Lance, I think my issue is if one agency is saying, they both have the same boss, right? At the end of the day, they all have the same boss, and you have two different agencies saying two different things. And the frustration across projects for different alphabet soup agencies telling you different things doesn't just exist in an infrastructure project, which unfortunately too many people on this call already know about. So find out why there's two different people saying two different things about the same thing. And if maybe they could, talk to each other.
I just need your office to call FDA in DC. Take it off the list.
But we can do that.
That's easy.
The call's easy. The result isn't always the same.
I know. That's why I love you.
Well, the water community in North Dakota is definitely excited about the word of passage. We've been watching that all year, and then to have it, I think it was passed by a voice vote a day or two ago. So it's interesting how, I guess, deadlines help things get done. So excited about that.
Yeah, we can't pass a budget out here unless there's a Christmas tree up. Well, we can't pass a funding bill. We can't pass a budget regardless, but unless there's a Christmas tree in the Capitol, it's pretty hard to fund the government.
Well, it's like a lawyer told me once, if it wasn't for deadlines, I wouldn't get anything done. And I guess that's what we're going to get. Is you gotta do it. And so that's something we all operate that way, apparently. Well, I don't, Dennis Reap has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. Congressman Armstrong, with presumably the new administration coming in, there's been progress in the last 4 years, waters of the U.S. Those type of regulations where they come down oftentimes through executive orders. What's your anticipation on that type of activity?
So there's two different ways this works. So the waters of the U.S. was actually a rollback of the rule, which makes it a little harder to unwind. I'm hopeful, and we've had conversations both at Interior and EPA about, I mean, there's not all executive orders are created equal. We've seen that during this administration, where when they've tried to roll back Obama era executive orders, they've ran into some hindrances in that. And we're hopeful that, I mean, at least for the most part, that it's not as simple as a stroke of the pen and it's all over again, and that they're going to have to go through a process. Unfortunately, in some of those things, I think I mean, the reality is that probably buys us time. But I'd be lying to all you guys if I didn't. I mean, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about ag. I'm concerned about energy. I'm concerned, and one of the reasons I'm concerned is, regardless of how you view the ideological differences in the Democratic Party right now, the climate issue seems to be the low-hanging fruit that they can get everybody to somewhat agree on. And to me, that means more unnecessarily burdens and regulations on North Dakota farmers, ag producers, and communities. And I think, some of it's chicken or the egg. Rural has gotten more red. Urban has gotten more blue. You can look at any map showing any election result from one end of the country to the other. But when you have the party in charge that doesn't represent the areas we represent, I think they oftentimes don't recognize how unbelievably burdensome some of this stuff is. And I don't think you have to go to coal or oil or natural gas. If you look at the conversations that have gone around with picking the new head of the new Secretary of Agriculture, they're talking about vertical farming in urban areas. They're talking about carbon credits or a carbon buyback program, and I just generally am skeptical when anyone from the federal government says we want to cooperate with our ag producers to impact climate change or reduce carbon, because that's code for we're going to regulate you and you have to do that. So hopefully the rules that are rolled back, we are going to be able to deal with it. But I anticipate, at least in some areas that are really important to us, a much more confrontational relationship. And I hope I'm wrong, but we'll be prepared for it when it happens. Lance, you're on mute.
We should have a bingo card for our Zoom calls, and you're on mute, your screen is dark, all the things that we say all these calls. You have commented before about the divisiveness and the partisanship. Is there a role for pragmatic problem solvers like you and others who are ready and willing to reach across the aisle? It seems like the only people that get attention these days are the extreme elements, whether it's right or left, that seem to draw either the campaign contributions or the cameras for the news cycles. Is there behind the scenes, is there things actually working together to resolve issues?
Yeah, and again, so I can talk to you about the universes I live in, right? And what I do. I mean, DC is a pretty siloed town. You serve on your committees, you meet with your committees and all of that. It's become exceptionally more siloed during COVID. Just how we vote, how we interact. But again, this seems like a weird topic to bring up in a water topics seminar, but I'm going to, because it's a huge issue and there's been a ton of bipartisan work, and it's a ton of bipartisan work that has actually been in front of the camera. Not in the back where everybody's scared to admit they're doing it. And that's on the big tech antitrust investigation. I don't know if anybody saw yesterday, but I think just about every attorney general in the FTC filed an antitrust claim against Facebook, and they're trying to unwind the WhatsApp and the Spotify. I can't remember merger. I served on that antitrust subcommittee for 2 years, Lance, and I'm just telling you, at the end of the day, partisanship matters in how we think we view solutions to this. And there will be real fights between Democrats and Republicans on that committee as to how that goes forward. But this was really significant bipartisan cooperation, and it was a serious investigation. And we are actually seeing a lot of the information we discovered being used in this FTC and Attorney General's lawsuit. So yeah, there are places for this. I think, unfortunately, in an area that's going to be really important to everybody on this call, which is it all gets brought into this Green New Deal climate change umbrella, right? That is where a lot of the regulatory problems we will incur end up occurring. And so that's what we got to be careful of. But yeah, I think people, and part of it is how it's covered. Part of it is all of that. There's a lot more that goes on in a good bipartisan way. The problem is the big partisan fights probably do still need to exist. I'm always one of those guys. I mean, you guys know that when you work with me in the state Senate. I mean, I can be partisan when you're supposed to be, when you have big differing ideas and conceptual ideas between liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans. But you should be able to work with the same person you're having that fight with on something else that you actually agree on. So we'll continue to do that and continue to move forward. I do really think even more so often than the Republican versus Democrat divide, it's the urban versus rural fight that is really going to end up, caught it. And that, like I said, that turns Democrat and Republican because of how demographics have shifted across the country. But I mean, we always have to be conscious of that. I think bringing Vilsack in as the ag secretary is going to be important. Most of our ag groups have a relationship with him, good, bad, or indifferent. They know. I mean, he's not. He understands the agriculture industry. He's governor of Iowa, and so we'll be able to work with some of those things. Now, EPA and Interior, who knows yet? We just don't know.
Could you highlight or talk about your different experiences with being in the North Dakota legislature compared to the U.S. Congress, and compare and contrast how it's worked for you personally?
Yeah, so when I campaigned in 2018, I campaigned a lot on local control. There's nothing about my 2 years in Congress that has dissuaded me from that argument. Government is always better when it's closer to the people. We simply don't want anybody from New Jersey and New York making any more decisions in North Dakota than they absolutely have to. Some things most people might not think about. I'm having a significant fear of missing out as the legislature comes into session in January. I miss my friends. I miss my colleagues, both sides of the aisle. I miss being able to touch and really, really dig into legislation that immediately is going to have an impact. I've been really lucky. This is the first time I've ever had a staff in any job I've ever had. When I was a lawyer, I was basically a solo practitioner. I had a office manager, but as far as that, state party chairman, obviously I had Roz working for me, but we handled completely different portfolios. You all know when you're a state senator, you don't have an office, you don't have a staff. So hiring really smart people, both from North Dakota and DC, and my DC staff has gotten, they have really picked up what we care about in North Dakota, why we care about it, and doing that. So that has been a lot of help. But I'm just telling you, the more we can make decisions in North Dakota, no matter how frustrated you are with a local city commissioner or county commissioner or even your state legislature, it doesn't do what Mary just said, where you can't get the same person to even call you back, right? We all have their cell phone numbers, and if we don't, we know somebody who does. And that's a huge, huge thing. And we should be really proud of how that works in North Dakota.